Hi, we're here with Jeremy, our Managing Director, and today we're going to be discussing POC reports. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Bob.
So, what challenges do developers take in relation to their points of connection?
So the really important thing for developers to understand as soon as they can in the development lifecycle is how far away and where their utility points of connection are. That's a complex question that's based on their site requirements and where utility capacity exists.
What's a local authority challenge?
So local authorities in the planning process are wanting more and more certainty around the utility challenge. They're wanting developers to do more feasibility work both before and during planning applications. It does depend a little bit on the policies that are being adopted by the different local authorities, but we're doing a lot more work earlier on in the planning process to assist our clients deliver that certainty to local authorities.
What stage in the process would a developer buy a POC report?
So from our point of view, it should be right at the very beginning of a development. The developers need to understand what utilities are in conflict with their developments. They need to understand what utilities they need to clear away to enable their developments to go ahead. But actually, the whole economic feasibility of a development, particularly smaller developments, often hinge on how far away a utility point of connection might be, as well as whether or not the capacity actually exists on site for the utility to hit any connection program. So that's why understanding any utility point of connection is something that's really important as early as possible in the development lifecycle.
Are there challenges that utilities face, and if so, what are they?
They have a real problem understanding where developers are in the development process. So there are a very large number of applications that are made too early and a very large number of applications actually that are made too late.
Right.
It's really important that developers understand at what point their sites are spade ready and that they communicate effectively with the utility companies so the utility companies can understand what their local capacity challenges are and which sites are going to be brought forward for development and when. So they do work quite hard to try and improve the information that they can get from developers, but developers need to understand the challenges that they have.
Okay. There's been lots of noise recently in the electricity market. What's going on there?
Yeah, so in some places around the country, it's very difficult to get local points of connection on any sensible time frame at all, and that challenge is going to continue to expand around the country because the pressure on the local electricity network is high. The requirements for new development, EV charging, as well as some of the challenges around green energy sources for development is making things extremely complex. And that makes the connection challenge and the way developers communicate with utilities much, much harder, and that's going to continue to be the case.
Why should developers consider all applications?
We're often getting into conversations with clients as to whether or not it's worth making a gas application, for example. We all know what the situation is around gas in the long term, but actually making a gas application, allowing an understanding of the decision between gas heating and electrical heating when there may be a capacity problem that exists locally is something that needs to be understood right from the outset. So making both an electricity and a gas application at the moment is what we're advising our clients to do so that they've got that choice, that flexibility later on in the process should they hit any electrical challenges.
What's going on in the telephony market at the moment?
Yeah, so the telephony market and the broadband market is extremely interesting because the number of options that are available since deregulation has gathered pace, the number of options available to developers is much, much higher than it ever used to be. And, so we all know that that OpenReach is an option and that Virgin Connection is often an option, but there are a lot more peripheral broadband operators out there. that can have local presence inside any form of ducting, even their own infrastructure, that allows many more options for developers in terms of getting high bandwidth connectivity.
And they're popping up all over the country.
And they're all over the country, yeah. They're in ducts all over the place, different companies in different localities everywhere. And understanding what the new connections options are beyond the normal incumbents is something that we can help developers with.
Okay. There's been lots of noise and chatter in the water market. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, so water deregulation, what I call local loop unbundling, is the most recent deregulation that's happened in the utility market. And there are a lot more options nowadays, a lot more options around independent water connection providers, in the same way that the independent gas transporters is something that's a fairly developed market for last mile connectivity. That also prevails now in the water market. So genuine all utility multi-lay capability exists for different developments depending on the size of the development and where that development is in the country.
Okay. So why should somebody buy an Apogee POC report?
So that they get that certainty. They get the certainty that there is a point of connection available and that it's reasonably local and that their capacity exists, as well as developing an understanding of the cost of getting electricity to the site, as well as a broader picture of what options they've got inside their connection strategy for the development.
Well, when we talk about Apogee POC reports, what kind of value do you think Apogee has?
Obviously, we know how to make the applications, and we also know how to decipher any connections offers that the network operators might be offering a developer. But we can also determine whether or not it's worth making applications to independent network providers and independent connection providers in order to give the developer a picture of whether or not there are any cost savings to be had in multi-lay schemes.
Okay. You mentioned value engineering a little bit. Can you elaborate on that for us?
So value engineering is about making sure that a developer understands the constraints that utility companies have in the local area. It's about understanding the utility conflict and making sure that any scheme that's brought forward by a developer is designed with utility conflict in mind, and making sure that that conflict is kept to a minimum and the costs of that utility conflict or the utility remediation is as low a cost as possible.
Can you share an example?
Yeah, so our best example is a scheme that we've done for a developer we call the site Sutton Benger. That was a really interesting connection because the network operator offered a capacity connection a very long way away from the site. It was about 4 kilometres, but by managing the client's expectation as to what loading requirement the site had, using some diversity there, and looking for 2 more local high voltage connection and splitting those 2 connections, delivered the capacity that was required for the site and saved the developer £500,000.
Wow, right, okay, that's great. So how has deregulation impacted POC reports?
Yeah, so I think we're finally beginning to realise what deregulation was all about, in that it is providing developers some more certainty and some better costs delivering the last mile, what I describe as the last mile connection from the point of connection down to the site. So I think it's taken some time because we've had to deal with one utility at a time, starting with telecoms, gas, electric and so on. But nowadays we're getting to the stage where that kind of deregulation of the market is starting to realise some real value for developers.
Okay. Just to finish off with, could you share the cost of a POC report and how long does one take?
Yeah, so our POC reports start at around £1,200, which includes the utility search. They can take sort of 20 to 30 working days, depending on the site and the utility companies that we're engaging. But really, that's for kind of smaller sites around 25 hectares and kind of up to 50 units. We calculate our fees on a fixed fee basis beyond that. So anything larger than 25 hectares or 50 units in size, is a price on application or fee on application quotation basis.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy, for sharing that with us.
That's my pleasure, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks.